Now, News 4 I-Team special report, Corruption on the Cumberland. Secret audio.
How do you explain what's on this audio?
I can't comment on it.
Threatening letters.
I immediately started looking over my shoulder, and I still look over my shoulder.
Misspending of taxpayer dollars.
This is one of the biggest debacles I've ever seen in terms of taxpayer money and basically fraud.
All leading back to elected officials.
He's got me doing the dirty work.
And despite blocks and threats,
you're going to stay away from him or we're going to have you arrested.
The News 4 I-Team exposed it all. To show how it all unfolded, here's Chief Investigative Reporter Jeremy Finley.
For the past 10 months, the News 4 I-Team has been investigating government officials in one of our region's most beautiful areas, the Cumberland. There, among rolling hills and small towns, we found a culture of corruption. The results of our investigations still rock the 14-county region. The executive director of a government agency terminated. District attorneys launching 2 separate criminal investigations. Auditors released a scathing state investigation. A federal lawsuit was filed, and a mayor had to pay back taxpayer dollars. And it all began when we got a tip that a woman in the Cumberland received an anonymous threatening letter. Our investigation found other women were receiving them too. Turns out all of them were public critics of one man, the highest elected official in the county. Are you critical of the county?
I surely am.
Jan Powell knew her frequent criticisms of Cannon County government on Facebook would make her some enemies.
I'm a taxpayer and I'm going to say what I want to.
But she never anticipated retaliation that would arrive in the mail.
Did you feel threatened by this letter?
Absolutely did.
And be heard in recorded audio of the highest elected official in the county.
That son of a bitch is going to live up.
How do you explain what's on this audio?
I can't comment on it.
Audio obtained by the News 4 I-Team of the county executive discussing an anonymous threatening letter, almost verbatim, during a private meeting. Here's the letter on the left. Listen to Gannon's own words on the right.
And if you think they won't find out, I'm warning you. You shut up or I'm putting this on Facebook. And then it said at the bottom, and if that don't work, I know some other stuff I'll put on Facebook.
He should not be representing our county.
It all started when Cannon County Deputy Clerk Tina George walked past Gannon's office and could hear him and Commissioner Adam Melton from the hallway outside. Fearing they were violating the Open Meeting Act, which forbids deliberation of county business in secret, she sat down and started recording.
You thought this is a meeting that shouldn't be happening.
Exactly.
And you needed to get proof of this.
And that's when George heard about a letter threatening a taxpayer not to say anything else on Facebook. We won't get into specifics, but the letter threatens to expose an alleged sex act performed by the taxpayer that the letter claimed happened in a horse trailer. Again, what the threatening letter read on the left and what Mike Gannon said in that meeting.
And then it said, if you're not, I remember when you were on a horse ride a few years ago in the back of a horse trailer giving 3 minutes. How would your church folks feel about you then? Something like that. I can't remember exact words. If I were you, I would stay off. I'm telling you, if I were you, I would be quiet on Facebook. She should have got it today. It was made with respect. That's what I heard.
I couldn't believe that they would, he would do such a thing or someone would be capable of doing such a thing.
And when that meeting ended, George was waiting outside.
Hi, Mike.
What are you doing?
What do you mean, what am I doing?
You listen. What are you doing?
I have heard everything you have said.
You probably have.
A few days later, Jan Powell went to her mailbox and found a letter from an anonymous sender containing the insulting sex claim she says never happened.
I was pretty scared because I didn't know who it was and I didn't know what they was going to do. And I immediately started looking over my shoulder, and I still look over my shoulder.
Powell went from scared to angry when George and her former county commissioner husband shared with her what was said in the recorded audio.
Strong-arm politics is all it is.
It appears that the county mayor had knowledge that this letter was going to be sent to you. What do you think about that?
I think he's a scumbag.
Did you have knowledge that these threatening letters were being sent to your critics?
I just can't answer that.
Yes, I was looking for Mike Gannon.
When Gannon didn't respond to our repeated phone calls requesting an interview, the News4 I-Team tracked him down. This is the audio. This is the recording of you having conversations knowing about a threatening letter to one of your constituents. You want to hear it?
No.
And our investigation found Powell isn't the only woman in Cannon County who's received an anonymous threatening letter after clashing with Cannon County's executive.
I got a letter, a threatening letter.
Dottie Duggan is a councilwoman in Woodbury.
When you look at the handwriting, how similar is it to the letter you received?
It's the exact same handwriting.
Now listen to what was said in that meeting between Gannon and Commissioner Adam Melton.
I was mortified, ashamed.
This critic of Cannon County government is still so frightened after receiving an anonymous threatening letter, she asked us to hide her identity. Look at how the G's and Y's are written on her letter and the others. The handwriting is strikingly similar. After she received it, the threat worked. She stopped posting about Cannon County government.
It's just to shut you up. And it did a really good job.
It shut you up.
It did.
You are the county executive.
I am.
You are elected to this position.
I am.
There are women in this county who have all received the same kind of threatening letter that have all been critical of you. Do you know that these letters are being sent to these women?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
If he had no idea what I was talking about, let's quickly revisit what he said in that meeting about the letter to Jan Powell.
She should have gotten it today. It was made with respect. That's what I heard.
You're welcome to call my attorney. I have no comment. Thank you.
And with that, Mike Gannon wasn't taking any more questions.
Not long after, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation confirmed they had launched a criminal investigation into Mike Gannon and those letters. And the reaction was swift in Cannon County, with taxpayers trying to remove the county executive, calling it a war on women. Most of Lynn Pickett's customers are women. It's why the talk in her store on the Woodbury Square is all about the county executive.
They're waiting and asking why he's still in office.
And if you're not outraged, you should be.
It's also why, across the street in the courthouse, taxpayers packed the county commission meeting to hear the results of an online survey taken by more than 200 people with questions like this.
Do you think Mike should resign as exec? 86%.
86% who say what the News4 I-Team exposed should prompt Gannon to resign.
How is it that you, Mr. Gannon, knew what was in those letters before they were ever out? These are questions that are important and need to be answered.
Not all, though, believe Gannon should step down.
I don't ask you to resign, Mike. I'll stand behind you 100%.
As for Gannon, he remained silent and only had this to say to the News4 I-Team before the meeting began. If they were to ask you to resign, would you resign?
No.
Tell me why.
No reason to.
I think it's disgusting.
The creator of the survey knows it changes nothing. No action was taken by the commission. He says the action has to be taken by the people of the county.
If that means changing the whole regime, we change the whole regime. I think there's a war on women in this county. I really do.
We would soon uncover more about what prompted one of those threatening letters and how it was connected to what some described as old-fashioned nepotism. All you have to do is listen.
You know, Dottie, I cannot believe that you are doing this.
And you can tell the September 2016 meeting for the Woodbury City Council was tense. A meeting that would ultimately result in an anonymous threatening letter being sent to an alderman, and claims that the county executive used his influence to help his relative get a taxpayer-funded job with the city.
He ought to be ashamed of himself. It's unethical.
It all started when Cannon County Executive Mike Gannon arrived at that meeting, where only city, not county issues would be debated.
Have you ever seen Mike Gannon ever at a city board meeting?
No.
Never before?
No.
Still, these current and former aldermen say Gannon, Alderman Adam Melton, and the former mayor walked down the hallway together before the meeting.
I see Mike Gannon and Adam and Harold Patrick walk out of the mayor's office. And my first thought was, that's odd.
On the agenda, hiring the next Woodbury Public Works Director. Up for the job, longtime Woodbury employee Ray Hunt and Gannon's cousin, Shane Gannon. The qualifications for the job: must hold or obtain a state license to operate water and sewer plant. Hunt had the license and already operated the city's water plant. Gannon did work for the Murfreesboro Water Department, but didn't have a license, and admitted on his application he pleaded guilty to a DUI in 2009. Alderman Dottie Duggan led the committee to recommend a candidate, and that choice was Hunt, not Gannon's cousin.
Mr. Hunt was the most qualified.
But when it came time to vote, Adam Melton, who was on the committee that recommended Hunt, was asked to vote.
Adam Melton? No.
The final decision: don't hire the recommended candidate, but instead give Gannon's cousin the job.
Well, I thought, what the heck? Here we are with someone licensed. They're hiring someone that's not licensed.
I was sitting there just going, I cannot believe this just happened. And Mike got up and left soon thereafter. He did not stay for the complete meeting. That's when it occurred to me, that's why Mike Gannon was there.
These current and former aldermen say their suspicions grew after what arrived in Dottie Duggan's mailbox.
After that, I got a letter, a threatening letter.
An anonymous threatening letter reading, "If I were you, I would stop criticizing the 3 aldermen who voted against Ray Hunt." The letter then went on to threaten to expose what Duggan says is a false claim about why she left a prior job. The letter read, "I can prove it. I will use it." Then a News 4 I-Team investigation revealed this: audio of a meeting between Alderman Adam Melton and Mike Gannon, where they discussed threatening letters being sent to female critics of the county executive, including Dottie Duggan.
Oh, it sure shut down. It sure shut down. It sure did. You know who made that? Hell, don't want that.
After Gannon's attendance at the city meeting, the letter, and then audio of Gannon discussing the letter, these aldermen came to the same conclusion.
Is there any doubt in your mind that Mike Gannon helped his relative get a job with the city?
Not at all.
Can I ask you a question?
When we caught up with Mike Gannon to ask him about the alderman's claim, we thought that Shane Gannon was actually his nephew. Listen to how quickly he corrects us.
Did you have anything to do with your nephew being hired in Woodbury?
It's not my nephew.
Okay, what relative is he to you?
No comment.
One of the women who received the letter had enough. Jan Powell filed a federal lawsuit against Mike Gannon, claiming the county executive, as well as the county commissioner, violated her civil and First Amendment rights, saying the 2 men developed a plan of action to retaliate against her. At roughly the same time, Gannon announced he would not be running for re-election. That decision came just as the sheriff of that county confirmed how Gannon was refusing to cooperate with the TBI investigation, and the calls for his resignation continued.
Okay, item 7 is public comment period.
When County Executive Mike Gannon called for a public comment period during Saturday's County Commission meeting, he got plenty of it.
On behalf of myself, the citizens of this county, and the taxpayers, I ask you to step down.
And unfortunately, I agree with Jane.
Video of that hearing shows, one after another, citizens asked the embattled county executive to resign.
Mike Gannon and Adam Melton need to be put out of office.
Gannon's also not commenting on what happened in mid-August at the county courthouse. According to the county sheriff, when a TBI agent arrived with a search warrant for Gannon, the agent couldn't get inside the public building. It was locked, even though it was normal business hours and Mike Gannon was inside. So the TBI had to call Cannon County Sheriff Darrell Young.
They needed to see Mr. Gannon and asked me could I unlock the door for him.
It is strange that the doors were locked.
Yes, and it not being 4 o'clock.
I understand that Mr. Gannon had locked the doors and would not come to the door. Is that correct?
That's what I understand. I called Mr. Gannon and told him that TB was outside needing to talk to him. I told him he was out there wanting to talk to him. Okay. Go ahead and let him in.
And we would soon find out just how far Gannon's friends in power would go to try and stop us from asking questions about that TBI investigation. We attended a meeting for a government agency where Gannon sits on the board. Watch as we try to ask him a question. One of Gannon's friends, Woodbury Mayor Andy Duggan, appeared to stumble in front of us. As we moved around him, Duggan then shoved me in the chest. As we continued to try and ask Gannon questions, Duggan continued to try and block us. At one point, I had to slip under him and finally got to Gannon, who would only refer our questions to his attorney. Our investigation into corruption on the Cumberland then took another turn. Sources encouraged us to look at the government agency where Gannon sat on the board, and specifically, we were told to investigate the executive director of that agency and his work habits. It's 2:45 on January 11th, and Luke Collins appears to be in hog heaven, literally. It took him 2 hours to get here to compete at this 4-H event at MTSU that started at 8 a.m. There's just one problem. While he was here, his timesheet shows he was working at his $90,000 a year position as the executive director for the taxpayer-funded Upper Cumberland Human Resource Agency. And he confirmed at the bottom he would not sign if it were inaccurate. There's his signature. Our undercover investigation began when people inside and outside the agency contacted us. While timesheets show him working, Facebook posts tag him out of state with friends. And documentation from within his own agency that claims to show how often he's not in the office. We brought all of our findings to directors on the agency's board. After you saw what I've shown you, what was your reaction?
Shocked, I think. I couldn't believe it.
For years, Collins has been in charge of this financially troubled agency that assists with everything from Meals on Wheels to transit for people without transportation.
Is it in some trouble?
The agency lost money last year. I went into the red, I think, over $300,000.
With so much at stake, two sources within the agency confirm they've been shown this document, internal tracking of Collins' work habits over a 2-year period, compiled by James Starnes, the deputy director of that agency. It notes when he left early from work or didn't work at all. And also this, Collins' cruise vacation, a vacation referenced on Facebook. A friend of Collins wrote, heading out on a fun trip on July 4th, 2015, and tagged him and his wife. And when the friend returned 8 days later, she wrote, heading home. But look at Collins' timesheet between the 4th and the 12th. No mention of a vacation at all that week. Here's another picture of him on a hunting trip, posted on Facebook on October 24th, 2013. But look at his timesheet from that entire week. It shows he was working. When it comes to your own county government, if someone doesn't put down vacation time on their sheet, are they abusing the system?
Absolutely.
You wouldn't tolerate that either?
No, sir.
Collins agreed to an interview, but then backed out the night before. So we tracked him down inside this building, but he wouldn't come out.
We're just simply asking to speak with him.
He has said no.
After reviewing our findings, board members say they had no choice but to turn it all over to state investigators.
I turned it over to the comptroller's office.
You were that concerned?
Yes, sir.
We quickly uncovered more about this executive director, including that taxpayers were funding his travels for meetings, but there was no proof he was showing up. When Luke Collins came to this meeting in Nashville, he didn't know the News4 I-Team was also watching. The reason we're here?
to see if he showed up. You see, records obtained by the News4 I-Team raise all kinds of questions for Collins. Why he got hotel rooms, received per diem, and reimbursement for travel from his government agency to attend certain out-of-town meetings when there's no proof he ever attended those meetings.
There's just been no accountability as far as Luke's concerned.
Take a look. Here's what he charged for a hotel, and here's what he got in per diem and reimbursement to attend a meeting for an association of human resource agencies in 2014. But look at the minutes for that meeting, where every single person who attended is documented. There's no mention of Luke Collins' name. And it's not the only time. In January 2016, same hotel, same reimbursement and per diem for the same association meeting. And check the minutes. Again, no record of Collins attending. And the executive assistant of that association confirmed in an email if they are not listed, they did not show up for the meeting. All of this paid for by Collins' agency, the Upper Cumberland Human Resource Agency.
I think it needs to be scrutinized very, very closely. That's taxpayer dollars. And if that's being misused or whatever, it needs to be scrutinized and investigated.
These board members overseeing Collins' agency, along with former staffers, say Collins' spending comes during a time of financial trouble for the agency, an agency that provides essential services like Meals on Wheels.
Well, a couple $100 will feed a few meals to folks that need the meals that's on the waiting list on Meals on Wheels program. It is taxpayers' money.
What we uncovered next raised questions about why this executive director used a transit vehicle designed for transportation of the poor for his own political purposes. For Tennessee Republicans, it was as big as it gets.
My fellow Republicans,
the vice president was the keynote speaker at the Republican States Men's Dinner. Among those in attendance last August, Luke Collins. And he and some of his agency's board members got here, not by his own car or renting a van, but by using one of the agency's public transit vehicles, the same ones funded by taxpayers to support the poor and elderly. You can see from photos obtained by the News4 I-Team, the group came equipped with campaign signs.
So if it was used for transportation to a political event?
I don't think that would be appropriate in my opinion.
In fact, the director of the agency's transportation program wrote to the News4 I-Team that this was not an allowable activity. So how was a taxpayer-funded transit vehicle for the poor used to drive an hour and a half to Nashville for a political event with a provided driver? Here's how. When Collins put in the request for the vehicle, he asked TDOT for an exemption that allows it to be, quote, used by government officials for official government business. And based on that, TDOT approved the exemption. But after the News4 I-Team obtained these photographs that show the campaign signs for what was clearly a partisan political event, we sent them to the agency's transportation director and asked if this was official government business. Her reply, absolutely not. And if I had been informed of that, I would have told Mr. Collins that this was not an allowable activity. Now, TDOT has questions too.
I think we'd like to follow up and find out what the purpose of the trip was.
After our News4 I-Team investigations aired, the board overseeing the agency had had enough. Whether it was around a corner,
Mr. Collins, I had a number of questions that I needed to ask you.
Or in between meetings.
I can't talk to you.
Well, I do have a number of questions that
Luke Collins didn't want to answer questions from the News4 I-Team. His personal attorney even saying this.
You're going to stay away from him or we're going to have you arrested.
But Collins could not avoid questions from his agency's own board, who voted to put him on administrative leave with pay.
I'm not confident that he can continue in this role.
I've been falsely accused, and I've come here to defend myself today.
Collins says in 2012, the board allowed him to take comp time, which explains his timesheets, even though none of the timesheets in question actually show his use of comp time. And then there's this email from 2016, sent by Luke Collins himself to the staff. Take a listen.
This is a list of employees who are not eligible to receive comp time. The first name on this list is Luke Collins.
there's a contradiction in there, so I'd have to look into it.
With his attorney vowing Collins did nothing wrong,
The investigation will prove that to be the case and your reporting to be false.
Collins left the meeting, forbidden for the time being from even talking to the staff of the agency he directs.
All we're asking you to do is just give us some space.
While the board took that action, we then discovered this wasn't the first time they'd known about problems with their executive director.
He's laying you off.
Well, surprise, surprise.
You're watching as Linda Trammell learned she'd been laid off.
He's got me doing the dirty work.
When the longtime employee of the Upper Cumberland Human Resource Agency feared she'd be let go that day, she decided to document what happened, and agency HR Director Joe Parker vowed to tell her the truth.
It's retaliation, Joe. You know it is.
I know that.
Think about what the HR Director said on January 3rd of this year when you look at this. A 2016 summary of an internal investigation by an attorney hired by the UCHRA board to investigate Executive Director Luke Collins. Among the concerns of the 49 employees who were interviewed, women employees and employees with a long employment history seemed to be singled out by Mr. Collins.
The harassment and the retaliation has gone on ever since he's walked in the front door.
Another complaint from 2016 that Mr. Collins is absent from the office on Fridays and Mondays and abused sick leave policy. Fast forward 2 years, and the I-Team uncovered timesheets showing him working while we found him on a trip and vacations. It means the same board that removed him temporarily from his position in 2018 knew about similar concerns in 2016. The investigating attorney wrote then, "The future of the agency seems to be quite precarious, and programs may be eliminated if there isn't a drastic change made."
I voted to fire him during that investigation, and so did 7 others, but the motion failed, so there was no firing.
As for the HR director of the agency, he tells the I-Team he stands by what he told Trammell.
Joe, what are you going to do if they ask you to testify? Let's just say we ask you to testify.
Tell the truth.
The State Department of Transportation then launched their own audit to find out if Collins had misused federal grant money. It can be a real struggle.
Now, deep breath.
Getting to the doctor or even buying groceries when you can't afford a car. It's why TDOT gave the Upper Cumberland Human Resource Agency 11 federal grants to pay for transportation services for the poor and elderly in this 14-county region. So when the I-Team exposed that the agency's executive director, Luke Collins, used one of the transit vehicles to haul campaign signs and travel to and from a partisan political event, it sparked concern that TDOT would frown upon issuing grants in the future.
We could be at a loss for those grants. So that's very serious.
But according to this audit letter, TDOT is narrowing in on this. Claims in a grievance by a former director that Collins was telling employees to falsify their time, that even if they weren't working on transportation projects, to record their time as if they were. Why? According to the grievance, it was the program with all the money.
There are federal funds involved here. There are very specific guidelines on how those funds are supposed to be used.
So now TDOT wants to make sure federal funds weren't improperly tapped, and if it's proven to have happened, federal investigators could step in. Collins' attorney is already on the defense, filing an open records request with the agency to obtain everything that's already been shared with the News4 I-Team from employees. Our corruption on the Cumberland investigation then expanded again, focusing this time on if mayors on the agency's board were pocketing taxpayer dollars. As you're walking out, I wanted to ask you, the last time we encountered Woodbury Mayor Andy Duggan, he shoved, blocked, and attempted to hide from our camera. That's him behind the hat. But there was no hiding what we found him doing in this parking lot. Something another mayor was doing too. Something this former government worker says results in the pocketing of taxpayer money.
It's a misuse of funds.
That's Duggan leaving a board meeting in Cookeville about 6 months ago. It's a board for an agency that provides crucial services like Meals on Wheels. City and county mayors sit on the agency's board. And the agency reimburses for mileage. And that makes sense if mayors are spending their own money driving their own cars. But watch, Duggan gets into a city vehicle driven by a city employee and leaves. And there's Livingston Mayor Curtis Hayes driving away in a city vehicle. There's the government plate. So if they get reimbursed for making the trip, that money would then be paid to their cities, right? Turns out, no. The checks, as they are with all board members, are made out to the mayors. And we verified with the cities. The checks were cashed, but no money was deposited in city accounts.
It's been difficult to watch.
This former agency worker sued in 2012 and included in her lawsuit that Cannon County Mayor Mike Gannon pocketed the agency's money, that he drove a county vehicle to the board meetings and requested mileage compensation. A watchdog group in Gannon's county posted this video in 2011 showing the vehicle. And just today, the county attorney confirmed it, emailing that several years ago, Mr. Gannon occasionally drove a county-owned vehicle to UCHRA meetings in Cookeville. This usage was investigated by the comptroller's office, and the matter was resolved. Mr. Gannon ceased its use. That attorney also confirms at no point has Gannon deposited any reimbursement money in his county's account.
If some of the board members are driving city vehicles here, should they take the reimbursement?
I would think not. If they do take the reimbursement, then I would think they would need to deposit that back into their county travel accounts, because that's where it should go.
To put it in perspective, these three mayors have earned roughly $3,000 in reimbursement in just over 3 years. Money from an agency that, again, provides Meals on Wheels. That amount would have paid for 400 meals.
There's nothing you want to answer about whether or not you pocketed this money?
The Livingston mayor didn't want to answer questions, only stating in an email that sometimes he drives a city vehicle if he also has business in Cookeville, and his monthly reimbursement is a small sum for his inconvenience, and that he thought the money was for his time.
My attorney's right in there.
The Cannon County mayor referenced our questions to his lawyer, who then said he only represents Gannon in an additional TBI investigation. But what about Mayor Andy Duggan?
We were able to reach him by phone. He wouldn't do an interview on camera, but did say everything that we've shown you in that video is not accurate, because he says he drives his personal vehicle from this town to Cookeville, where he visits his son. He then has a city vehicle pick him up at that location and drive him to the meeting and then take him back from that meeting. We think he should explain all of that to you himself. Let's go see if he will. So it's 2:30 in the afternoon and the mayor's not here, but he did tell me over the phone there would be no interview. Knowing how all this looked to the people of the Cumberland, the board of the agency had to decide, would they keep their executive director?
The only thing I'm angry at is him.
Linda Trammell could only stand in the hall, waiting to see what the board of the Upper Cumberland Human Resource Agency would do about their embattled executive director.
Because of the misuse of state and federal dollars.
Roll call, please. When the private presentation was over, it didn't take long to find out.
Well, I make a motion we terminate the executive director.
While the board can't discuss what the internal investigation found, one member summed up his reaction to the findings like this.
Very concerned, and that's about as far as I can go.
The investigation was launched and Collins placed on administrative leave after a series of News4 I-Team investigations.
I'm a Christian, harbor no ill feelings.
After his termination, Collins told the board he intended to retire at this job.
Is there anything you want to say about your termination?
No, sir. No, sir. Thank you.
Never imagining it would end like this. Collins blasted the findings of the News4 I-Team that cost him his job, but soon found out state investigators with the comptroller's office had uncovered the same problems. Starting with their first finding about the former executive director's incorrect timesheets. The News4 I-Team went undercover to expose it, how Collins was at a hog competition with his family when his timesheet showed him working. We also found case after case of social media showing him on vacation, but his timesheets showed him doing the work of the agency.
The former executive director indicated that he was working those days, when in fact there were social media posts which showed he was either on a hunting trip in Colorado or on a cruise.
The comptroller's second major finding, no proof of Collins attending meetings. Our investigation found while the agency was paying for Collins' lodging and travel to out-of-town meetings, there was no record of him actually attending. The comptroller also found he submitted reimbursements and charges for a conference in Washington, D.C., but never registered to attend, earning more than $700 in reimbursements and spending more than $3,000 in credit card charges for the 3 trips.
And that money should be accounted for.
Once again, a district attorney had to call in the TBI and direct them to launch a criminal investigation into these mayors of the Cumberland.
This is one of the biggest debacles I've ever seen in terms of taxpayer money and basically fraud.
The News4 I-Team watched as mayors got into city or county vehicles and drove away from this government agency meeting. Here's why that's significant. They're all reimbursed for their mileage to attend board meetings for the Upper Cumberland Human Resource Agency. But since they were driving or riding in taxpayer-funded vehicles, you might think the money was passed on to their cities or counties. Our investigation found, though, it wasn't. The mayors kept it. Mark Cunningham works for the Beacon Center, a government watchdog group.
Essentially, these people are driving cars that are paid for by taxpayers, gas that's paid for by taxpayers, and then they're reimbursing themselves from another government agency to take care of that. I mean, it's clearly wrong.
After our stories aired, District Attorney Jennings Jones asked the TBI to launch an investigation into 2 of the mayors, Cannon County Executive Mike Gannon and Woodbury Mayor Andy Duggan. Our investigation also found Livingston's mayor doing it as well, but he's outside of the DA's district.
I mean, this is what leads to distrust in government.
It comes as another district attorney, Bryant Dunaway, is currently considering criminal charges after what we exposed about the agency's now terminated former director, Luke Collins.
No government agency should have this many problems.
What happened next stunned the residents of the Cumberland. One of the mayors paid taxpayer dollars back, and the terminated executive director ended up with a fat payday.
Mayor Hayes, would you explain to taxpayers why you've paid that money back?
No response from Livingston Mayor Curtis Hayes as to why he paid back more than $700 taxpayer dollars.
I think he felt like he needed to pay that back.
A News4 I-Team investigation found Hayes and 2 other mayors pocketed reimbursement money for traveling to board meetings for the Upper Cumberland Human Resource Agency. While the other members of the board drove personal vehicles, our cameras found Hayes and the other mayors drove or rode in city vehicles. Yet the reimbursement money wasn't passed on to their cities or counties. They kept it. While Hayes paid it back, the others have not.
Do you think they should pay it back?
Looking at it now, probably in hindsight, probably would be wise.
While that money is coming back, much more is going out. Today, the board voted to offer a severance package worth more than $27,000 to the terminated director of that agency, Luke Collins.
How do you explain to the public that you deserve money after you were terminated from this position?
I filed a grievance. It's public information.
That grievance shows Collins' opinion that certain people within the agency conspired with the News4 I-Team and that his termination wasn't proper. So why give him a severance package? Board members say it's cheaper than fighting an anticipated lawsuit.
Does it sting at all for you and for the other board members that voted to terminate him to now have to pay him more money?
Very much so. Very much so.
Is it a lousy deal for taxpayers, though, to have to pay this amount ultimately with their money for someone who was terminated?
Obviously, in any situation like this, you would prefer not to pay anything. But sometimes looking at potential lawsuits and the legal bills that you would incur, while it's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, it is maybe the prudent business decision.
As of the airing of this special, 2 criminal investigations are still underway. A federal lawsuit is continuing in court, and a state audit is being finalized that could determine whether or not federal dollars were misused. And you can count on the News4 I-Team to keep investigating. Thanks for watching.